Say goodbye to your credit card rewards. Greedy corporate mega stores, led by Walmart and Target, are pushing for a law in Congress to take away your hard-earned cash back and travel points to line their pockets. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill would enact harmful credit card routing mandates that would end credit card rewards as we know it. If you love your credit card rewards, tell your lawmakers, hands off my rewards. Tell them to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members only pay a $25 copay or less. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm your host, Aliana Kernodle. The Los Angeles Unified School District Board voted on a resolution to revise its 2011 school cell phone policy to ban phones for students during school hours with a few caveats. Joining me to discuss this is Chalkboard News editor Brendan Clary. Brendan, what are the details of their new policy?
Yeah, so those are going to be ironed out. So the kind of the interesting thing, and I've seen this in a couple of larger school districts like Chicago and LA, Unified School District, is they'll have like a resolution, and I think I've seen this in Boston public schools as well. They'll have a resolution to say we're going to do a policy in the future. So it's like, or like we'll have a resolution for guiding principles when we're considering this. So it's sort of like a meta policy of like we're going to have a resolution governing how we make the policy for cell phones in the future. And that's kind of what this was. So this is like we promise that we're going to create policies within 120 days. So like we have some time and we're going to iron out the kinks. And this is our intention, basically. So it's sort of like saying like, hey, I'm going to do this. So those are going to be ironed out. So the policies and their implementation, they're going to listen to experts. They said labor partners, which means, the union, staff, students, and parents. So they're maybe they'll have listening sessions. Maybe they'll have like the policy committee, review it. And so with some of this, you're waiting through a lot of bureaucracy. You can't just go out there and say, hey, we're cutting it and we're going to do it this way. And I think that, with a school district so large, that's sort of typical. But I think that, you also have some of this other, these other considerations of like, we're going to try to make what is, sort of a directionality into like the possibility, right, of how do you implement this? How do you like make sure that it's scaled up and that everybody's on board? But that, this is a big step, but it's still just like, it's a step. It's not sort of like a finality. And I think that I've seen a lot of headlines saying like they banned it. And it's like, yeah, they said that they were going to, but it's not like it's taking effect as is necessarily like right now. I think that there might be some room for some smaller changes there. So that's some of the caveat there, I guess. But then within that, there was like a couple of other things, like the school board, they said that there would be like an amendment that would be added for newcomers. So there was just somebody, like a board member, brought up the question of like, well, what if students need their phone for translation services? Like maybe they use it for Google Translate and they need to have access to that. And so that was something that they added in there. Like there would be, maybe that would be discussed of like, how do you do that? And if you go to the school and you maybe are bilingual or maybe you speak English, it would seem kind of like, well, why does a newcomer student get to have a phone during lunch and I don't? Like how do you implement that? So then it gets tricky. It gets sort of like, difficult of like, how do you balance that? How do you square? How do you know if somebody needs their phone or not? Like what are the rules actually going to look like, right? And that can be, I think, a little bit difficult. And then there was also an amendment added to that resolution that would maybe it kind of intimated that there might be like some litigation against social media companies. And so that was just like an aside. It was sort of an interesting thing. And you could argue, is that the role of the school board or not? Like, do they have that sort of like protective litigator sort of mold? Like, should they go after social media companies for that? That's, just kind of an interesting question. I think of like, what kind of role are they taking on, or is that sort of their thing? But is that some of the, again, like, then it kind of gets more nebulous again, like we're sort of back out and sort of like these ideals of like, we could do this and we should look into doing it.
And who kind of led the move for this specific policy change, and what were some of the reasons behind it?
No, that's a great question. So Nick Melvoin, I hope I'm saying his name right. He's a former teacher and a board member. And he basically said that, when he was in school, students were, quote, glued to their cell phones. And he said, not unlike adults, right? So, kind of admitting that a lot of people are addicted to their phones, or like have that sort of relationship with their phones. But he said, they're surreptitiously scrolling in school, in class time. They have their head in their hands, walking down the hallways. They're not talking to each other or playing at lunch or recess because they have their AirPods in, he said to the board. So, and then, he referenced research showing, the harmful effects that phones have on academic performance and physical and mental health, and, these other things. And this kind of comes at like a very, like, I think, bad time for social media and like kind of cell phones. Like, there's been a lot of like attention, the books written about the effects of smartphones. And then the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, like, he wrote a New York Times piece recently kind of slamming these social media companies and saying like there needs to be a warning label. And again, California is, a big fan of that. So I think that might resonate there. Like, they have warning labels on a lot of different things. So, I could see them. The
classic, it's like, oh, in California, this is known to cause cancer.
Yes. Yeah. I think a lot of people have seen that even on, something like, this has been known in the state of California to cause cancer, so, or like some other kind of thing, or birth defects. So, and it could be the kind of thing of like, well, maybe that happens in California first. And I've heard about, talk that, Governor Newsom there is looking into something like that. So, it wouldn't surprise me, but there's other pushback too from parents and teachers who basically said, they spend more time policing cell phone use than they used to teaching, right? So Jessica Quindell, who's a current LAUSD parent and was also one like back in 2010, basically saying, I'm spending as much time trying to govern the cell phones as I was like teaching back then. So like there's been a shift, and this tracks with like a lot of different things you hear teachers like. There's maybe even a policy at a school not to have your cell phone out, but like who's enforcing it? And if it's teachers, then they're spending their time doing that instead of learning. And if like, what do they have? What really can they do to get a student's cell phone away if the student doesn't want to give it up and doesn't want to learn, right? Like, what is your recourse in those kind of moments? And I think that is what is going to need to be ironed out here, right? And some of those bigger questions, because this is a big school district. There's a lot of students here, and there's a lot of big questions like that.
Well, Brendan, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at chalkboardnews.com.
Say goodbye to your credit card rewards. Greedy corporate mega stores, led by Walmart and Target, are pushing for a law in Congress to take away your hard-earned cash back and travel points to line their pockets. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill would enact harmful credit card routing mandates that would end credit card rewards as we know it. If you love your credit card rewards, tell your lawmakers, hands off my rewards. Tell them to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill.